Hello, it's Carney Smith. I'm going to record now. Let me make it comfortable on this bed. Okay. The boldness of the third book's title and the implication of its subtitle were his way of coming out on the issue of gay liberation, where the first two books exposed the failure of conventional heterosexuality in broad strokes. He was now in a position of authority to document the importance of homosexuality in no to the unfinished task of building Western civilization. The same task which Mahatma Gandhi had once dryly confided to a reporter would be a good idea. This time, his words found a reading public, yet although this book has sold steadily year after year and is the most serious examination ever undertaken of homosexual psychology, it was never to see anything like unqualified acceptance, even within the gay community of his adopted city. Its title appeared in not one gay studies bibliography, nor was its author so much as footnoted in any history of gay liberation. I seemed to be caught between two potential audiences, Paul later observed of those who found him unreadable. Thinkers who hate homosexuality and homosexuals who hate to think. Late in life, he was to say that the gay community's worst enemy was its own unique brand of homophobia. But the late 60s were glorious. He started calling his patients students, spending their therapeutic hours in collegial discussions of the issues he was examining. At the time I entered his life, he was already beginning to draw about him a band of brothers from numerous creative enclaves who were much more like friends and fellow philosophers than merely wet kittens. It would have been naive to expect unqualified success with everyone who walked into that office, of course, and sometimes getting his ideas across must have seemed as pointless as teaching entomology to ants. Some clients were on a different wavelength altogether, even if they did wear their hair long. Looking at his larger landscape made their eyes hurt. But their longing for normalcy, even if sincere, was a goal Paul would never countenance. A few disputatious shrink haters could not plug their ears for love or money, shaking their heads at the surface complexity of his formulations, they decided that psychiatrists were just as crazy as ever. He learned to spot quickly what kind of patient was open to what he now called his kind of truth. Typically, they were young radicals, though not of the political stripe. Many wanted to become psychotherapists themselves, not really knowing what this might entail. They were simply open to life, and he loved them for that. Despite the fact that Paul worked best with peers, men and women who believed in human science and wanted to help other people live higher quality lives, there was no professional stiffness to deal with in his office. You were more often than not greeted with a hug and a kiss, and if you took up the first 5 minutes with breathless scuttlebutt there were no demerits to be paid, nor was the clock running. You could sit on the floor and eat lunch if you felt like it, and you didn't have to wonder why the hell Paul hid behind a stupid necktie he didn't own any. But the best thing about being Paul's student was not that he made you uncomfortable. No, I mean, he made you comfortable. But that when he made you uncomfortable, when he challenged your defenses, he always did it for your own good, didn't gloat over being right, and afterwards bent down to help pick up whatever pieces of your pride had been shattered in the encounter. Paul was something new for most of us, and it was hard all of a sudden to listen with all the attention that he deserved. When we finally did let down our guard and trust in ways long forgotten, it was like breathing for the first time. It was agony knowing he would not always be with us. Rightly or wrongly, there was no way for hindsight to encapsulate this kind of therapy into a list of stratagems. Oddly, he never wrote a word about it. Each student needed something special and got it. Their stories are different. Gradually, the students got to know one another, either because they brought their friends to Paul or simply because he introduced them to one another. Two of them eventually decided to start a therapy group to teach psychological polarity on their own. As valuable as his insights were to each student personally, it is amusing to reflect that there would persist on the periphery of this world an irrepressible minority who continue to view Paul's contributions merely as a sort of theory of gang liberation. It was common, in fact, for even the most likable of these to use the less than tactful nickname, the theory, when referring to what Paul by then considered to be a body of knowledge about as uncertain as the theory of gravity. After counseling in New York for several years, Paul and his students felt the need to open some kind of center where they could interact more regularly, not only with one another but with new people as well, accelerating the learning process for everyone. Those of us who knew something of history could imagine how disturbing his semantics, not to mention his ideas, would seem to conventional minds, and were reluctant to expose ourselves to the prejudices of public scrutiny, even that of a gay public. But in 1973, a basement was rented on 9th Street, and after days and weeks of cleaning and painting, Paul and his students began to hold regular talk groups. The more common phrase discussion group seemed formal and not in the friendly spirit he wanted. In the same year, a counseling service was started, a modest journal issued, and the first paperback edition of Homosexuality printed, to which Paul added a brilliant new foreword. Our agenda was much deeper than anything the journalistic cliches of that time could capture. But since it was easy to advertise our project as a gay liberation organization we became. Since gays were more open to our kind of truth anyway, we didn't mourn for straight people who could have learned from us, but who didn't want to be associated with sexual deviance. What was remarkable about the 9th Street Center was not how many people learned from Paul and his students, but how much Paul and his students continued to learn from the center. One of the first lessons impressed upon us was that it was possible to try too hard, to change one's lifestyle and outlook too fast. Through a relentless ungluing of habit, they'd assumed was mandatory. Many of the more ambitious members became disoriented in their eagerness to personify noble dissatisfaction. They learned that one could find fault with anything if one were critical enough, even life itself. In so severe an atmosphere of a Holocaust, which soon called creativity poisoning, even suicide as a cure could not finally be ruled out. So in those first months, he taught us to moderate the level of our interpersonal stimulation, to turn down the dial, in one student's phrase, as psychologically radical as we indeed were. Each now found a personal way to tune in to the quiet background music of happiness and contentment with the simple pleasures of the here and now. We stopped judging ourselves and our friends so harshly merely for exhibiting the scars of having grown up in a sick society, and decided we would have all the time we needed. We started going to movies again, decorated our apartments finally, and took in pets with funny names. New people who wandered into the center had no way to know that we were sitting on a scientific revolution, and occasionally amused themselves with empty-headed arguments. Okay. Let's see if I can get going now. I did a lot of reading just now. If you want to see these videos, subscribe to my channel, okay? It's Kearney Smith. Goodbye.